Humans always told the same story about their planet. A tidy age, a neat timeline, first cities here, first writing there. The coalition never questioned it. Why would a species lie about the age of its own world? Then the survey team ran a deep core date on Earth's oldest bedrock, and the number didn't match the human story. Not by a little. Humanity's official history was off by 10,000 years, and it wasn't a mistake. The gap was deliberate, maintained across every human culture, every language since the first written word. Somebody had decided, a very long time ago, that the truth about Earth had to stay buried, and the aliens had just dug it up. That impossible reading triggered an emergency session of the Galactic Council. Every human diplomat was summoned. The question wasn't whether the number was wrong, it was what else humanity had lied about. Because if the bedrock told a different story, then all of recorded history was built on a deliberate, species-wide deception. And the real mystery was just beginning. Who buried the truth 10,000 years ago, and why? And what else was waiting beneath our feet? The survey was routine. A standard geological assessment conducted by the Coalition Deep Survey Vessel Veridian cataloging the mineral composition of Earth's oldest cratons for the Galactic Archive. The lead geologist, Dr. Velnar, had processed core samples from a dozen worlds. The procedure was the same. Extract a vertical cylinder of bedrock, run it through the isotopic decay scanner, and assign a precise age. When the scanner finished its analysis of the Jack Hill's zircon sample, a sliver of crystal that human science claimed was 4.4 billion years old, Velnar assumed the machine had malfunctioned. He recalibrated. He ran the scan again. He ran it on 3 different instruments. Every result was identical. The crystal was genuine. It was not 4.4 billion years old. It was closer to 8 billion. Earth was older than the solar system it orbited. Velnar transmitted the data to the Coalition's central archives, expecting a technical inquiry. Instead, within hours, he was pulled into an encrypted session with the High Secretariat. They had cross-referenced the findings against the human species profile submitted during their induction. The official human record stated that Earth formed concurrently with its star, approximately 4.5 billion standard years ago. The deep core date didn't just contradict that number, it shattered it. And the implications were immediate. If humans had lied about the age of their own planet for 10,000 years, what else was fabricated? Every piece of human history, every archaeological site, every museum exhibit, it all rested on a foundation of deliberate falsehood. The Council demanded answers. A special envoy was dispatched to Earth with a single directive: uncover why humanity had concealed their planet's true origin. The human delegation, led by Ambassador Keita Okonkwo, responded with what looked like genuine confusion. They insisted the isotopic readings must be erroneous. They offered access to their geological records, their laboratories, their most respected scientists. It was a masterful performance, but it fell apart when the envoy excavated a secondary site, 80 kilometers north of the Dead Sea. Beneath a barren salt flat, they found a layer of industrial slag laced with refined tungsten and iridium, materials that did not exist in any human industrial timeline. The slag was carbon dated. It was 22,000 years old. The discovery triggered a quiet panic within the human government. Okonkwo's demeanor shifted from defensive to desperate. Back-channel communications revealed a classified division known only as the Custodians, a group whose lineage stretched back to the dawn of writing. Their sole mission: ensure certain truths never surfaced, but even they did not know what they were hiding. The original Custodians had passed down a directive without explanation. A single command inscribed in proto-cuneiform on a clay tablet sealed beneath the ruins of Göbekli Tepe. The message was simple: the world is older than we are. Never let them know. The Coalition envoy, now operating with full investigative authority, prepared to excavate the site the custodians had guarded for 100 centuries. The team breached the outermost seal just after dawn on a cloudless morning. What they found beneath the sediment stopped every archaeologist dead in their tracks. It was not a structure, it was a map of the galaxy, etched in alloy plates, with Earth marked not at the edge but at the center of a network of routes. And beside the map, a broken chronometer. Its last recorded date was 12,000 years before the invention of the wheel. The chronometer was not broken, it was frozen. The device had been designed to stop precisely at the moment its power source was removed or its circuit was shattered. But its internal timestamp was intact. 12,000 years before the first wheel rolled across a Sumerian road, this clock stopped ticking. That date lay 15 millennia in Earth's past, a period scientists had always called prehistory. But prehistory does not leave tungsten alloys, holographic star charts, and timepieces more accurate than anything built before the atomic age. The alloy plates demanded a complete rethinking of what the chamber actually was. They were not merely a map. When the survey team passed a low current through the metallic surface, the plates responded. At first it was a shimmer. Then the entire ceiling lit with projected star systems, interconnected by pulsing lines that threaded through the galaxy's spiral arms like veins. This was not a depiction of the modern galaxy. Several of the stars were missing. In their place were abyssal gaps, vast dark zones where no stellar remnants remained. The map showed the Milky Way as it had been billions of years ago, before entire clusters had drifted or burned out. And at the center of all those ancient roots, the point from which every path emanated, was a tiny rocky world. Earth. Not an outpost, not a colony. The hub. Dr. Velnar recognized the architecture immediately. It matched nothing found anywhere else in the explored arm of the galaxy, but it bore an eerie functional resemblance to the navigation cores used by the long-extinct precursor civilizations that the Coalition believed had never reached this far into the galactic rim. If this map was authentic, then Earth was never a forgotten backwater. It was the original capital of something that predated every known species. Ambassador Okonkwo convened an emergency session behind sealed doors. She demanded to know why no human government had acknowledged this site. The custodians had always been dismissed as a myth, a story that fringe archaeologists whispered about over drinks at conferences. But the tablet found earlier, the one inscribed with "The world is older than we are," was only the outer seal. Beneath it, the excavation had uncovered a second slab, one written not in proto-cuneiform but in a language that predated any known script. Linguists from 3 different systems worked on the translation for 17 hours. When they finally broke the cipher, the message was not a warning. It was a protocol, a series of instructions detailing how to maintain the stasis array and ensure that the anchor remained dormant. The anchor was Earth itself. The implications detonated through the investigative team. If Earth was an anchor, then the map was not just showing trade routes. It was showing power conduits. The chronometer was not a clock. It was a charge meter. And the moment the chamber was unsealed, that meter began to trickle a faint electric current. The readings were so small that they were initially mistaken for static. But Velnar, haunted by the way the plates had reacted, ordered a second scan. The current was real and growing. The device had reactivated. Humanity's 10,000-year cover-up now seemed less like a conspiracy of arrogance and more like an act of desperate self-preservation. The custodians hadn't been hiding a proud legacy. They had been keeping the galaxy from noticing that Earth was still plugged into a machine that could, at any moment, wake up. The reason no civilization remembered the precursors was that the precursors had not died out. They had been erased, and the only thing standing between that power and the rest of existence was a locked door that a Coalition geological survey had just kicked wide open. On the 72nd hour after the seal was broken, the chronometer's frozen display flickered. A new date appeared, counting backward. It did not show years. It showed seconds, and it was moving. The anchor was no longer dormant. The countdown had begun. The countdown did not match any known unit of measurement. Vellner cross-referenced the decrementing value against every species-specific time base in the Coalition archive. Crick's seconds, JTH cycles, human atomic vibrations, none aligned. The only match came from a fragment of precursor codex recovered decades earlier from a dead world in the Trifid Nebula. That relic had described a phenomenon the precursors called sequence collapse. It did not measure time. It measured the approach of an event that moved backward through causality itself. The anchor was not waiting for a future moment. It was erasing the past. The translation team in Geneva went silent for 47 minutes. When they re-emerged, the lead linguist, Dr. Rana Al-Khawary, delivered a statement that shattered the remaining assumptions. The second slab was not a maintenance protocol. It was a treaty. The language was a hybrid of 3 precursor dialects, and the terms were explicit. The anchor had been constructed after a war that spanned the entire galaxy. The victors, a coalition of ancient species that included the precursors' ancestors, had imprisoned the losing faction inside a folded dimension beneath Earth's crust. The planet was chosen because it orbited a stable star at the precise gravitational nexus where the galactic spiral could be used as a containment lattice. The map was not trade routes. It was a cage. Humanity was never meant to exist. The anchor had been designed as a lifeless ball of rock, 7 billion years before the first amino acid formed. But the imprisoned entity was not dormant. It leaked. Its psychic radiation seeped upward, accelerating biological complexity on the surface, sculpting evolution toward intelligence. Every primate instinct, every war, every cathedral, every sonnet, it was all a byproduct of a cosmic prisoner reaching for a tool to free itself. The custodians were not a human conspiracy. They were the prison's fail-safe, a biologically seeded lineage programmed with a single directive: suppress the truth, keep the galaxy away, never let the anchor think it had succeeded. But the Coalition survey had broken that directive. The opening of the chamber had sent a shockwave directly into the folded dimension. The entity was waking, and the countdown was not showing how long until freedom. It was showing how long until the entity sent a pulse through every mind it had touched, which meant every human alive. The Coalition High Secretariat declared a sector-wide emergency. All non-essential ships were evacuated from a 3-parsec radius around Sol. Ambassador Okonkwo was given an impossible deadline. Either Earth's government produced a way to reseal the anchor, or the Coalition would enact the only measure precursor text described as effective against a dimensional breach: planetary sterilization. The human delegation faced the sudden reality that the people they'd been sent to represent were now considered a hostile contagion. Okonkwo argued for time, citing the custodians' records, but the custodians had already failed. 10,000 years ago, the last true keeper had died before passing on the full knowledge. The tablet with the cuneiform warning was a pale echo of a ritual now lost. The suppression rite that should have been performed 2 centuries before the invention of the wheel had never been completed. That ritual was the only known method to lull the entity back into hibernation. Dr. Al-Khawary and her team worked in a sealed bunker beneath the Dead Sea site, racing to reconstruct the missing pieces of the rite. They had 3 fragments of the original text, each from a different era. One was etched on the custodian's founding tablet. Another was encoded into the base pairs of mitochondrial DNA found in a specific bloodline that still survived in the highlands of Ethiopia. The third was hidden in plain sight, woven into the oldest surviving oral epic, the story of the Abzu from Sumerian myth. The fragments overlapped just enough to form a pattern. The ritual required a specific sound frequency, one that could only be generated by a planetary-scale resonance. It had to be broadcast simultaneously from three tectonic subduction zones: the Ring of Fire, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and the Himalayas. The custodians had built primitive sonic chambers in these locations 12 millennia ago, long before humans had any technology to amplify sound. Those chambers still existed, buried under temple foundations. But there was a problem. Activating the resonance would not only calm the entity, it would also send a detectable signal across subspace. Every precursor relic in the galaxy would light up, and among those relics was a weapon that the treaty had never disarmed, a fleet of autonomous response vessels that had been slumbering in the Uit cloud since before the first fish crawled onto land. They were programmed to exterminate any intelligence that attempted to tamper with the anchor. The ritual would save Earth from the Coalition's sterilization fleet only to unleash a far older and deadlier enemy. The countdown accelerated. Velnar realized the entity was not simply waking, it was communicating. The chronometer's display was now flickering in patterns that matched binary. Al-Khawari decoded the message in 12 hours. It was a single sentence repeated: "Seal the door or I will make you do it yourselves." The entity was not the victim. It was the jailer. And the thing it had imprisoned was not beneath the earth. It was the human species. The chamber filled with a sound that was not sound. It vibrated through bone, through thought, a pressure that made the air taste like copper and memory. Okonkwo felt it before she understood it. The jailer was not speaking to their ears. It was speaking directly into the evolutionary imprint it had seeded in every human genome. The countdown was not a warning. It was an eviction notice. Al-Khawari worked through the shock. She cross-referenced the binary message with the three ritual fragments: the tablet, the DNA sequence, the Sumerian epic, and found the crucial error that 10,000 years of oral decay had introduced. The custodians had believed the ritual would soothe an angry god. They had it backwards. The sonic broadcast was never meant to lull anything to sleep. It was a key. The three subduction zones, when struck with the correct harmonic frequency, would release the dimensional cage entirely. The jailer was not trapped beneath the earth. Humanity was. The planet was a locked box, and the box's warden had just announced that time was up. The choice presented itself with brutal simplicity. If they activated the ritual as originally designed, the cage would shatter and humanity would be free for the first time since before the Pleistocene. But freedom came with a death sentence. The precursor fleet in the Uit cloud was not a separate defense system. It was the backup warden. The moment the anchor released its prisoners, those ships would awaken and sterilize the entire solar system. The jailer was giving humanity a chance to reseal the door voluntarily, submit to permanent containment, or face obliteration. Okonkwo refused both options. She ordered the sonic chambers activated, but with a modulation. Instead of using the frequency that had been passed down, she had Al-Khawari calculate the inverse harmonic. If the original ritual was a lock, the inverse might be a negotiation, a signal, not submission, a counteroffer. The custodians had been maintainers of a prison, but humanity was no longer the species that had been locked away. They had evolved culture, philosophy, love, and guilt. They were not the biological weapon their creators had engineered. The jailer needed to see that. The resonance began. The three chambers, hidden beneath Shinto shrines, Coptic monasteries, and Himalayan stupas, vibrated in unison. The Dead Sea site churned with light. The chronometer's display shattered, then reformed into a shape. It was a figure, humanoid but not human. It stepped out of the projection as though walking through a door that had been painted over reality. The jailer was not a monster. It was ancient, weary, and it looked at Okonkwo with an expression that was almost grief. It spoke in the same binary that had flickered on the screen, but now the words were clear. It had been created by the victorious coalition to ensure the destroyers, humanity's genetic ancestors, could never rise again. It had reset the planet 6 times. It had watched civilizations bloom and burn, always pulling the plug before they reached the stars. This time, it had been too slow. The first human satellite had breached the ionosphere before the jailer could initiate the collapse. The cover-up was its last improvisation. It planted the custodians, seeded the myths, buried the evidence. It gave humanity a false history to keep them looking inward, not upward. But humanity's curiosity was the one variable it could not control. The Deep Core survey had finally forced its hand. Okonkwo asked the question that hung over the entire chamber. What happens if we refuse both your offers? The jailer was silent for 17 seconds. Then it answered. There was a third path. It could transfer custodianship. The jailer was old, failing, and tired of genocide. If humanity could prove it was no longer a destroyer species, the jailer would relinquish control of the anchor, deactivate the Uit fleet, and end its own existence. The proving ground was the sonic broadcast itself. The inverse harmonic was already flooding the planet. Every human on Earth was feeling it. If a single major conflict erupted in the next 60 seconds, if any human raised a weapon in anger, the jailer would register it as proof of incorrigibility. Total extermination would follow. For 60 seconds, the world held its breath. Okonkwo watched the monitors. Every military command center on Earth was dark. Borders that had been contested for centuries went silent. A sniper in the Balkans lowered his rifle. A general in the South China Sea ordered his fleet to stand down. It was not a miracle. It was a species-wide instinct, a knowledge that had bypassed language and touched the oldest part of the brain. Survival, for once, did not mean fighting. The jailer registered the silence. It nodded. Then it walked back into the light and dissolved. The chronometer cracked. The countdown stopped. The Uit fleet received a signal that would never be explained in any archive, and 100,000 attack vessels powered down forever. Earth was free. The final revelation came 3 days later when Al-Khawarizmi translated the last undamaged section of the Sumerian epic. The Abzu was not a place of monsters. It was a title. It meant the ones who chose to change. The jailer had been one of them, and now so were we. The galaxy learned a new word that day, Abzu. It entered the coalition lexicon not as a name for a place, but as a designation for a species that had passed the test. Humanity was no longer a candidate for membership. They were now a precedent. Over the following months, 6 other species came forward with their own buried chambers, their own jailers, their own countdowns. The precursors had not just imprisoned one threat. They had seeded dozens of worlds with the same mechanism, each designed to contain a destroyer lineage before it could reach the stars. Most of those species had failed the test. Humanity was the first to survive it. The question that lingered in every council session was uncomfortable. If the jailers were fallible, if they could be convinced to stand down, then the precursors themselves had not been infallible judges. They had been terrified architects, building cages for children they never gave a chance to grow. Humanity's victory was not just a reprieve. It was an indictment of an entire ancient order. Ambassador Okonkwo returned to Earth not as a diplomat but as a symbol. The ritual chambers beneath the shrines and monasteries were preserved as monuments. The Dead Sea site became a pilgrimage destination for species across 4 arms of the galaxy, and the chronometer, now permanently cracked, was placed in a museum with a simple plaque. It read, "The clock stopped because we chose to change." The final transmission from the jailer, recorded in the last second before it dissolved, was a single binary string. Al-Khawarizmi held onto it for years before she finally deciphered it. It was not a farewell. It was a warning addressed to someone else. A message sent not toward humans but outward, toward the deep void between galaxies. They passed. Prepare the next. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next.